Critics in the 80s had a list of things a film was supposed to be. These 10 ignored every single item on that list. The reviews were brutal. The audiences showed up anyway. Let's talk about why. Rad, 1986. The critics called it a feature-length BMX commercial with a plot borrowed from every underdog sports film ever made. Now, they weren't wrong. They also completely missed the point. Hal Needham directed this about a small-town kid named Crew Jones who gets a shot at a professional BMX race called Hell Track, and every single frame of it understands exactly what it is and commits completely. The BMX sequences were performed by real riders doing real tricks at real speed, and that physical authenticity comes through every scene. The soundtrack alone, Send Me an Angel running over a BMX slow dance sequence in a school gymnasium, is one of the most genuinely strange and completely sincere moments the decade produced. It shouldn't work, it works completely. Critics wanted craft and self-awareness. The kids who grew up watching this on VHS wanted to feel something about a sport they loved, and Rad gave them that without apology. 30 years later, the cult around this film is enormous and still growing. Critics moved on. The audience never did. The Last Dragon, 1986, Motown produced a martial arts film set in Harlem about a young black Bruce Lee obsessive, searching for the mysterious master who can help him achieve the highest level of martial arts mastery, called the Glow. Critics found it absurd. The mixing of kung fu cinema, Motown musical sequences, 80s New York street culture, and a villain named Shonuff, the Shogun of Harlem, who enters every scene demanding people acknowledge him as the meanest man alive. It didn't fit any existing category, and reviewers didn't know how to handle something that cheerfully refused to be one thing. Timac plays the lead with a genuine sweetness that grounds the whole thing. Vanity is extraordinary. And Julius J. Carey III as Shonuff understood he was playing a comic book character in the best possible way and pitched every single scene accordingly. It made $25 million. Berry Gordy understood his audience completely. The film isn't confused. It's just operating on a frequency the critics weren't tuned to. Cobra, 1986, Sylvester Stallone plays Marion Cobretti, a cop so far outside normal police procedure that the film doesn't even try to justify it. He eats cold pizza with scissors. He drives a custom 1950 Mercury. He tells a grocery store hostage taker that he's a disease and Cobra is the cure. Critics hated every frame of it. Too violent, too simple, too much Stallone doing exactly what Stallone wanted to do with zero studio interference. It made $49 million domestically in 3 weeks. Because the audience wasn't there for complexity. They were there for Stallone at his most purely concentrated, doing the thing he did better than anyone else in 1986, which was making consequence-free action feel genuinely satisfying. Cobra is not trying to be a good film in any traditional critical sense. And it's trying to be a specific experience, and it delivers that experience with complete reliability. That's harder than it looks, and critics never gave it credit for the craft involved in making something this deliberately excessive hold together. The Monster Squad, 1987. Fred Decker directed this about a group of monster-obsessed kids who discover that Dracula, Frankenstein's monster, the Wolfman, the Mummy, and the creature from the Black Lagoon are all real, and have arrived in their town looking for an ancient amulet. Critics called it derivative, a Goonies knockoff with better monsters. The comparison to Spielberg-produced adventure films was meant as a dismissal, and what they missed is that Decker and writer Shane Black treated the monster mythology with genuine respect. These aren't comedy versions. Dracula is actually scary. The Wolfman sequence generates real tension, and the film trusts its child characters to handle genuinely dark material without softening it into something safe. The kid who calls Frankenstein's monster his friend, while the adults are trying to destroy him, that relationship has more emotional weight than most adult dramas from the same year. The audience found that. Critics were too busy comparing it to better-known films to look at what it actually was. The Wraith, 1986. A supernatural street racer appears from nowhere and starts hunting down the gang that murdered him in his previous life. One race at a time. Charlie Sheen. A futuristic Dodge M4S Turbo Interceptor, practical car destruction, a glowing suit that costs nothing and looks perfect. Critics dismissed it immediately as cheap and incoherent. The incoherence is actually the point. The Wraith operates entirely on atmosphere and forward momentum. It never slows down long enough for the plot holes to catch up with it. The car sequences are genuinely impressive practically, and the 80s Arizona setting gives everything a neon-dusted heat that feels completely specific to its moment. It found its audience on cable and never lost them. A film that understood it was a vibe delivery system and built everything around delivering that vibe as efficiently as possible. Sometimes that's enough. The audience knew it then, and they still know it now. Over the Top, 1987. Sylvester Stallone arm wrestles truckers for custody of his son. That's it. That's the film. Critics lined up to explain why this premise didn't work as cinema. The reviews were some of the most openly contemptuous of the decade. The arm wrestling circuit in this film is treated with the same gravity Rocky treated boxing. Every competitor has a backstory. Every match has stakes. Stallone plays Lincoln Hawk with the same bruised sincerity he brought to every underdog role, and the father-son story underneath the arm wrestling is actually earned in a way the premise doesn't suggest it will be. It made $16 million, which disappointed the studio but built a VHS audience that turned it into exactly the kind of film critics assumed it was trying and failing to be. A genuine crowd pleaser. The crowd was just right, and the critics were wrong. Labyrinth, 1986, Jim Henson, George Lucas producing, David Bowie as Jareth the Goblin King, a 15-year-old Jennifer Connelly navigating a massive fantasy world to rescue her baby brother. It bombed. Critics found it uneven, too long, too strange. Henson was devastated by the reception and never directed another feature film. He died 4 years later. What the 1986 audience didn't know and the decades since have proven is that Labyrinth was operating on a frequency specifically tuned to children experiencing it at exactly the right age. The Henson creature work is extraordinary. Bowie's performance is completely committed and genuinely weird in ways that a safer casting choice would never have attempted. The logic of the Labyrinth itself mirrors the internal logic of adolescence. Rules that keep changing, adults who can't be trusted, a self that keeps shifting. It found its real audience on VHS. That audience grew up and never let go of it. The film Henson considered a failure became one of the most beloved fantasy films of its generation. He deserved to know that. Okay, real quick. Frame Time is genuinely trying to hit 1,000 subscribers, and we are going absolutely crazy watching that number. If you're still here and you haven't subscribed yet, please just hit the button. It costs nothing, and it means everything to this channel right now. Tango Cash, 1989. Two rival cops, Sylvester Stallone as the buttoned-up, by-the-book one, and Kurt Russell as the loose cannon, get framed for murder and have to work together to clear their names. Critics found it loud, dumb, and aggressively formulaic. The buddy cop genre had been done. 48 hours, Lethal Weapon. What did this add? What it added was Stallone and Russell doing something neither of them normally did, playing for laughs. The chemistry between them is genuinely funny. The film is self-aware about its own absurdity in a way that Cobra, for instance, never was. And when Russell's character gets captured and forced to dress in women's clothing, his complete commitment to the bit while Stallone looks increasingly horrified is funnier than most straight comedies from the same year. It made $63 million. The audience wasn't confused about what they were getting. They wanted two of the biggest action stars of the decade sharing a screen, bouncing off each other, and blowing things up. That's what they got. Critics wanted something more serious and missed the joke entirely. Lock Up, 1989. Stallone again, 3 times on this list because 1989 critics genuinely could not stand him, playing a model prisoner transferred to a maximum security hell prison run by a warden with a personal vendetta against him. Donald Sutherland plays the warden with a cold, bureaucratic menace that's more unsettling than any amount of shouting would be. The film understands that institutional cruelty is scarier than physical cruelty because it has paperwork behind it. Critics called it manipulative and predictable. The emotional beats are obvious. The villain is cartoonishly corrupt. So the ending is exactly what you expect. All true. The audience didn't care because Stallone made you feel every single one of those obvious emotional beats with complete sincerity. He was never an ironic actor. He meant everything he did on screen. And in 1989, that lack of irony was treated as a flaw by critics who had decided sincerity wasn't sophisticated. The audience knew better then. The audience still knows better now. 10 films, all written off, all still watched. Hit like, subscribe to Frame Time, and we'll keep defending the films the critics got completely wrong.